The ruins of Calvith Prime. The Draknari called themselves the survivors of the void. It was not an empty boast. In the galactic community of over 400 sentient species, the Draknari stood apart as the only known Deathworlders, beings who had evolved on a planet so hostile, so violently unforgiving, that merely surviving childhood was considered an act of defiance against the universe itself. Their homeworld, Drakneth 7, orbited a binary star system prone to lethal radiation bursts. Its atmosphere was a cocktail of sulfuric compounds and nitrogen storms. Its fauna was nightmare fuel for most xenobiologists. The Draknari had not merely survived. They had thrived. Commander Vrethike stood at the edge of the excavation site on Calvith Prime, her 4 armored limbs braced against a wind that would have shredded the environmental suits of most other species. The planet's sky was a permanent bruise of green and violet, lit by lightning storms that never ceased. Acid rain had carved the canyon walls into alien cathedrals. The mining colony below was half buried under a collapsed ore processor, a disaster that had killed 14 of her crew and disabled their primary excavation drones. "We need help," said her second-in-command, Thresh, his voice tight through the comms. "The Interstellar Cooperation Bureau has responded. They're sending a team." Vrethike clicked her mandibles in irritation. "Which species?" "Humans, Commander." A long silence followed. "Humans," she repeated flatly. "The soft ones. The pink, fragile, single-stomached creatures from Sol 3. "Yes, Commander." She had encountered humans twice before. Once at a diplomatic summit on Corellan Station, where their ambassador had fainted from the recycled air quality that Draknari found merely bracing. Once during a joint patrol mission where the human crew had required climate-controlled quarters, filtered water, mandatory sleep cycles, and something they called snacks. They were friendly enough. Curious, even charming in their helpless way. But Deathworlders? The idea was absurd. The human shuttle arrived 6 standard hours later, descending through the acid storm with what Vrethike grudgingly admitted was reasonable piloting skill. It landed on the reinforced pad and the hatch opened. 4 humans stepped out. They were not wearing the heavy environmental exosuits she had expected. They wore standard-grade hazmat suits, the kind rated for moderate chemical exposure, not the violent acid content of Calvith Prime's atmosphere. One of them, a tall female with close-cropped dark hair, was checking readings on a handheld scanner. She looked up at the toxic sky with an expression Vrethike could only describe as interested. "Commander Vrethike?" the human called out over the howling wind, walking toward her without any apparent concern for the gale force gusts. "I'm Dr. Lena Vasquez, Emergency Geological Response Division. We heard you had a collapse event." "Your suits," Vrethike said. "They are insufficient for this environment." Dr. Vasquez glanced down at herself. "The acid content is about 23% higher than our suits are rated for. We've got neutralizing coatings on the exterior layer." She shrugged. "We'll be fine for a few hours." "Where's the collapse?" Vrethike stared at her for a long moment. Then she pointed toward the canyon. What followed was the first lesson. The Draknari team had spent 3 days trying to safely reach the trapped miners without triggering secondary collapses. Every calculated approach had been abandoned as too risky. The geology of Calvith Prime was notoriously unstable. The ore veins ran through a crystalline substructure that shattered unpredictably under vibration. Dr. Vasquez's team spent 40 minutes reviewing the data. Then they proposed something that made Vrethike's neural cluster seize with disbelief. "We go in manually," said the shortest human, a stocky male named Kowalski. "No heavy equipment. Hand tools and portable sensors. We map the stress fractures as we go and pick a path through them." "That is suicide," said Threshake. Kowalski looked at him with genuine puzzlement. "We do this kind of work on active volcanoes back home. Calvith Prime is geologically similar to our Kamchatka Peninsula during a minor eruption cycle." He paused. "This is actually pretty mild, compared." They entered the collapsed tunnels. Vrethike watched the sensor feeds with growing bewilderment. The humans moved through spaces that required them to crawl, to squeeze through gaps that a Draknari could not have navigated. When a stress fracture released and sent a wall of ore dust and broken crystal toward them, Kowalski grabbed his colleague and pulled her flat to the ground in a single motion, and the debris cloud passed over them like a wave over rocks. They didn't panic. They waited. Then they kept going. 4 hours later, they brought out all 11 surviving miners. As the rescued crew was loaded onto medical shuttles, Dr. Vasquez sat on a piece of rubble, eating something from a foil packet. She looked exhausted but satisfied. "Your world," Vrethike said slowly. "Sol 3. What is it like? Vasquez considered the question. Honestly? Kind of like this in some places. We've got acid lakes, tectonic collapse zones, magnetic anomaly regions that scramble equipment. Our oceans have things in them that would give your xenobiologists nightmares. She smiled. We like to think it made us adaptable. Vrethike watched her eat her strange packaged food in the acid rain of Calvith Prime and said nothing. But she was beginning to reconsider several long-held assumptions. Educational note. The Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia is one of Earth's most volcanically active regions, with over 160 volcanoes. Real geological rescue operations in such environments require the kind of adaptability and calm under pressure depicted here. A genuine human trait born from centuries of surviving a genuinely dangerous planet. The deep cold of Yaren's abyss. The Velthari had a saying, only the void is colder than Yaren. They were not wrong. The ice world of Yaren orbited a dim red dwarf so feeble that its light barely reached the planet's surface, leaving it in perpetual blue-gray twilight. Surface temperatures averaged negative 180 degrees Celsius. The subsurface ocean, kept liquid by tidal heating from Yaren's 3 moons, was home to the most valuable biological compounds in 12 star systems, and some of the most aggressively territorial marine life ever catalogued. The Velthari were ideally suited to it. Silicon-based, with antifreeze compounds naturally integrated into their circulatory systems, they had evolved on a similar ice world and considered cold environments to be simply normal. They had colonized Yaren 80 years ago and built the deep-sea research station known as Yaren's Abyss, a pressurized habitat 3 kilometers beneath the ocean surface. Station Director Selvaris did not want humans on her station. They are warm-blooded, she told the Cooperation Bureau representative with patient condescension. Their core temperature will drop within minutes in deep cold water. They require heated suits, heated food, heated sleeping quarters. They are thermal liabilities. They requested assignment, said the Bureau rep. And their credentials in deep-sea research are. I have read their credentials. Selvaris had indeed read them. She had read about Earth's oceans, the Mariana Trench, the hydrothermal vent systems, the abyssal plains. She had read about human deep-sea explorers who descended to 11 kilometers in simple pressure vessels. She remained unimpressed. Earth's oceans, while moderately dangerous, were warm by any reasonable measure. Yaren's ocean was a different world entirely. The humans arrived nonetheless. 3 of them, Dr. Marcus Webb, an oceanographer, Dr. Priya Anand, a xenobiologist, and a quiet, broad-shouldered man named Torres who was introduced only as a dive specialist. Selvaris met them at the airlock with carefully managed politeness. Your suits, she said, examining the equipment they had brought, are rated for standard deep-water environments. Yaren's pressure differentials at depth are 40% higher than Earth's deep ocean at equivalent depth, said Dr. Webb. We know. We had our suits modified at Cerulean Station before arrival. Pressure reinforcement, enhanced thermal insulation, modified buoyancy systems. He patted his suit's arm. Also, Torres here has done free dives in Earth's sub-zero polar waters. Just for context. Selvaris looked at Torres. The man gave her a small nod. Arctic diving, he said. Ice diving, technically. Water temperature around -2 Celsius. No suit, just a wetsuit. He paused. I mean, I wouldn't do that here. But cold doesn't really bother me much. -2 Celsius. Without a thermal suit. Selvaris processed this information and found it deeply strange. The crisis that had prompted human involvement was a biological containment breach. One of Yaren's native megafauna, a creature the researchers called a void eel, 8 meters of bioluminescent ambush predator with jaws strong enough to crack the station's outer hull, had entered the research wing through a damaged access port. 3 Velthari researchers were trapped in a sealed lab. The creature was between them and the extraction airlock. The Velthari had one solution: wait for the creature to leave on its own, which could take days, or use concussive charges to drive it out, which risked further hull damage. Dr. Anand had a different idea. I'll go in, she said simply. The silence in the control room was absolute. The creature, Selvaris said carefully, is 8 meters long. It has sensory organs that detect bioelectric fields. The moment you enter that corridor, it will know you are there. Yes. Anand was already pulling on her dive suit. I'm counting on that. Show me the creature's behavioral data, feeding patterns, territorial responses, threat displays. You intend to study it while it is actively threatening your life? Anand looked up with genuine enthusiasm. Director, I spent 4 years studying great white sharks from inside a cage that a determined one could have dismantled in about 40 seconds. I've done behavioral studies on Nile crocodiles from a kayak. She smiled. I like apex predators. They're fascinating. What followed became one of the most studied xenobiology field recordings in Cooperation Bureau archives. Dr. Anand entered the corridor. The void eel detected her immediately and oriented toward her, its bioluminescent frills flaring in a threat display. She stopped. She matched its stillness. When it moved, she moved, not away but to the side, slow and steady, positioning herself against the wall. She spoke to it in a low, even voice, not words it could understand but sound, the controlled, confident sound of a predator that was not afraid. The void eel watched her for 11 minutes. Then it turned and moved toward the damaged access port and left. Dr. Anand walked to the sealed lab, opened it, and walked the 3 Velthari researchers to safety. How, said Selvaris when Anand had removed her helmet, did you know that would work? I didn't know for certain, Anand admitted. But most apex predators share certain evolutionary logic. Threat displays are warnings, not commitments to attack. If you respond to a warning with calm, non-aggressive presence, if you don't look like prey and don't look like a rival, many of them will choose the easier option. She accepted a heated beverage from Torres. Humans have been doing this with Earth predators for a very long time. We had to. We spent most of our evolutionary history sharing space with things that could kill us easily. Selvaris thought about the warm, predator-rich world that had shaped these strange, calm, terrifyingly adaptable creatures. Your homeworld, she said. It produced you. It really did, Anand agreed cheerfully. Educational note. The behavioral techniques Dr. Anand uses are based on real animal behavior science. Ethologists, scientists who study animal behavior, have documented that many large predators use threat displays primarily as warnings. Understanding these signals has allowed humans to work safely with some of Earth's most dangerous animals, from great white sharks to grizzly bears. The fire corridors of Suldran Forge. There was a reason the Ignathri had built their civilization in fire. They were, by any biological measure, extraordinary. Carbon fiber musculature, a double circulatory system that regulated heat distribution with mechanical precision, and a nervous system adapted to process sensory data in milliseconds. They had evolved in the volcanic archipelagos of their homeworld, Ignar Prime, where the ground regularly opened up beneath the feet of the unwary and rivers of magma ran like water through valley systems. The Ignathri were proud of their status as the galaxy's second confirmed Deathworlders. They had been proud of it for exactly 47 years, the 47 years since first contact with the Draknari who had claimed the title first. The 2 species shared a mutual respect built on the bedrock of shared suffering. Their planets had tried to kill them. They had survived. That was a bond that softer species simply could not understand. So when a joint Ignathri-Draknari industrial project on Suldran Forge, a volcanic megastructure that had been converted into the largest industrial processing facility in the outer reaches, suffered a catastrophic lava flow breach that trapped workers in 3 separate sections of the deep forge, the Ignathri sent a distress call to Draknari Command. Draknari Command sent the only available rapid response team in range. Humans. Commander Igrathul of the Ignathri stared at the holographic roster for a very long time. They sent humans, he said. Yes, Commander. To a volcanic forge environment. Yes, Commander. The surface temperature of the affected corridors is 600 degrees Celsius in the cooler sections. The human team lead says they have heat-rated equipment and experience with volcanic environments. Igrathul had seen humans exactly once, at an interspecies athletic competition on Nexus Station. They had competed in the endurance swimming event and won. He had found it mildly impressive. He could not imagine what use they would be here. The human team of 5 arrived in a vessel that looked, to Igrathul's eyes, like it had been deliberately armored with additional plating. They wore suits that were visibly modified, not standard industrial heat gear but something custom-built with layers he didn't recognize. Their leader was a compact, weathered human male named Sergeant Dario Ferreira, who had the flat, unhurried eyes of someone who had been in genuinely dangerous situations so many times that fear had worn smooth. What's the situation? Ferreira asked before Igrathul had even finished his greeting. Igrathul found that he respected this. He explained, 3 groups of workers trapped. 1 group in an upper processing bay, accessible through a cooled service corridor. 1 group in a mid-level storage section where a lava shelf had formed a new barrier. The 3rd group, the most critical, were in the deep forge itself, surrounded on 3 sides by active lava flow, accessible only through a natural lava tube that was intermittently flooded with superheated gas vents. The lava tube, Ferreira said immediately. That's the one I'm most interested in. Gas vent timing? Irregular. Anywhere from 30 seconds to 4 minutes between cycles. Active lava flow inside the tube? Along the eastern wall. A channel roughly 2 meters wide. Ferreira nodded, looking at the holographic display with the expression of someone solving a moderately interesting puzzle. We'll need the upper group out first to clear our retreat path. Then the mid-level. Then we go through the tube. The tube is, Sergeant, the tube is, Yggdrasil struggled for words. Even my engineers will not enter the tube during an active gas cycle. How far down does it go? 300 meters. With an 8-meter section where the ceiling drops to less than 1.5 meters. Ferreira looked at the smallest member of his team, a young woman with red hair named Chin. That's you. She nodded. Obviously. What Yggdrasil witnessed over the next 9 hours permanently altered his understanding of humanity. The humans moved through the fire corridors with a systematic calm that reminded him, uncomfortably, of the way Master Forge workers moved, the practiced, deliberate motion of beings who had internalized the logic of dangerous environments and were no longer fighting against them, but working within them. When Ferreira's team entered the lava tube, Yggdrasil watched the feed from their suit cameras. The tube walls glowed orange and red. The lava channel ran 2 meters to their right, close enough to touch. The temperature in their suits was registering warnings he found alarming to read. And Chin, small, efficient Chin, crawled through the 8-meter low section flat on her stomach while a gas vent cycling was happening 20 meters above them, and she did it without hesitation. They retrieved 12 workers from the deep forge. All alive. Afterward, Ferreira sat on a cooling stone slab and drank from a water container that had a small heating coil in it. The humans Yggdrasil had noticed seemed to need to keep their food and drink warm, a biological requirement that struck him as almost endearingly fragile in contrast to everything else about them. Your world, Yggdrasil said. It has volcanoes? Plenty. Ferreira sipped his warm drink. My family is from a region in Brazil. We live near the Pantanal, which is a different kind of dangerous, mostly wildlife. But I trained for this work in Iceland, Hawaii, the East African Rift. Earth is very volcanically active. We've built cities near active volcanoes. Farmed the slopes of calderas. He shrugged. We learned to read the signs. Yggdrasil looked at this tired, warm drink-sipping human who had just crawled through a flooding lava tube, and felt something he very rarely felt. Humility. We believed, he said slowly, that only Deathworlders could do what you just did. Ferreira looked at him with something that might have been mild amusement. What do you think we are? Educational note. Earth has approximately 1,500 potentially active volcanoes worldwide. Countries like Iceland and Japan have built entire infrastructure systems around active volcanic regions. Volcanologists and volcanic emergency response specialists genuinely trained to work in extreme heat environments. The human capacity to adapt to volcanic terrain is a real and remarkable product of our species' history. The static wastes of Nullen Drift. The Nullen Drift was where machines went to die. The planet had no official name beyond its survey designation, NC 7741. It orbited a magnetar, a type of neutron star with a magnetic field so powerful that it had warped the planet's own magnetosphere into something barely describable by standard physics. Compasses pointed in 17 directions simultaneously. Electronic systems failed within hours. Even the hardened military-grade equipment used by the most advanced species in the galaxy lasted an average of 3 days before the magnetic interference degraded their core functions beyond repair. The Sectari had gone there because they had no choice. The Sectari were a species that most of the galactic community considered as close to Deathworlders as it was possible to be without the formal designation. Their homeworld was a high-radiation environment that had driven them to develop dense, radiation-absorbent cellular structures and a natural sensitivity to electromagnetic fields that served them like a sixth sense. They could navigate by magnetism. They could feel electrical currents in the air. On Nullen Drift, those abilities were chaos. The research expedition of 23 Sectari scientists had gone to study the magnetar's effects on the planet's crystalline geology, a theoretically valuable research mission that had gone catastrophically wrong when the expedition's AI navigation systems failed on day 4. Leaving them stranded in the waste with manual tools only, no reliable comms, and a geological event, a massive subsurface crystal resonance cascade, building beneath them. The Sectari were essentially blind in an environment that overwhelmed their native electromagnetic senses. Their technology was failing. Their navigation was guesswork. A rescue team was assembled. Most species refused. Their equipment would fail. Their biology couldn't handle the radiation. Except one. The human team that arrived on Nullen Drift was unlike any rescue crew Director Brelisi K of the Secretary Science Commission had ever encountered. They came in a ship that, upon inspection, turned out to be largely mechanical rather than electronic. They had, apparently, located or built a vessel with hydraulic systems, mechanical control surfaces, and navigational instruments based on analog gyroscopes and magnetic independent positioning. Their personal equipment was equally archaic by galactic standards. Paper maps. Mechanical watches. Compasses. Brelisi K stared at these long and hard, that had been modified somehow to account for the multi-directional magnetic field. How did you modify those? She asked the team's navigator, a tall human woman named Okafor. Dead reckoning, Okafor said. We use our last known position, our speed, and our direction of travel to estimate where we are. The compasses are calibrated for the local magnetic variance. We mapped it on the way in. She tapped a paper notebook. This is our positional record. Brelisi K looked at the paper notebook. This is your navigation system. Part of it. Okafor patted the notebook with evident affection. Humans navigated Earth's oceans for thousands of years before we had any electronic assistance. We used stars, currents, dead reckoning, and local knowledge. We actually had to learn to do this in training. She smiled. Most of us secretly love the excuse to use old methods. The rescue operation was a masterclass in low-technology problem-solving. The crystal resonance cascade was building fastest in the eastern wastes. The humans calculated this using seismic measuring equipment based on spring-loaded mechanical sensors, reading the data manually. They planned the evacuation route using topographic paper maps cross-referenced with sectary expedition logs, drawing the path by hand. When the route required them to cross a region of particularly intense magnetic flux that was physically disorienting the sectary researchers, the humans led them through it. They weren't immune. Brelisi K could see the humans' movements becoming slightly unsteady in the worst zones, their equilibrium disturbed by the magnetic interference. But they compensated. They held hands in a human chain so they could feel if anyone was drifting. They used physical landmarks, rock formations, crystal outcroppings, rather than instrumented bearing. The youngest human on the team, a teenager who had apparently been included as some kind of apprentice, was navigating by counting steps and tracking shadows. He's 17, the team lead Martinez explained when he caught Brelisi K staring. Old enough to train for field work. He's good. He is a child. By some definitions. Martinez didn't sound troubled by this. Humans start learning to operate in difficult environments pretty young. Survival skills, wilderness navigation, reading weather patterns. His grandmother used to take him hiking in the Andes without a GPS. She looked at the boy. He was checking his mechanical watch with a focused expression. He actually knows more about non-electronic navigation than most of my senior team. 18 hours after arrival, all 23 sectary scientists were aboard the rescue vessel. As the ship powered out of Nullen Drift's magnetosphere, Brelisi K sat beside Martinez and tried to organize her thoughts. Your species, she said. How long have you been spacefaring? About 150 years since first contact-capable FTL, Martinez said. But humans have been exploring our own world for about 100,000 years. Before electronics, before advanced materials, before half the tools we take for granted now. She looked at the gradually normalizing sensor readings. We had a very long period where we had to figure out how to go places and do things and survive in situations with whatever we had on hand. We're used to operating without perfect conditions. Brelisi K thought about the 17-year-old boy, counting his steps across a magnetic nightmare, navigating by shadow. She thought about a species that had crossed oceans before they had engines, climbed mountains before they had pressure gear, and explored jungles before they had vaccines. You are, she said carefully, more remarkable than you appear. Martinez smiled. We get that a lot. Educational note. Dead reckoning navigation, using known speed, direction, and elapsed time to estimate position, was the primary navigation method for ocean-crossing ships for centuries. Polynesian navigators crossed the Pacific Ocean using star patterns, wave behavior, and bird flight patterns. These ancient human navigation skills represent one of the most impressive examples of low-technology problem-solving in Earth's history. The Council of Deathworlders. The chamber had been built to impress. Nexus Prime's Grand Council Hall was 300 meters of polished obsidian and crystalline viewports, with a domed ceiling that projected a real-time holographic display of the known galaxy, 800 billion stars, mapped and catalogued, with the network of inhabited worlds glowing like a civilization's fingerprints across the dark. It was the most powerful room in explored space. Decisions made here shaped the fate of 400 species. Today it was hosting an unusual session. Commander Vrethak of the Draknari stood at the left speaking position. Commander Igrathul of the Ignathri stood at the right. They had requested this session jointly, a thing that had never happened before in the 50 years since the two species had established contact. Station Director Selvaris of the Velthari sat in the observer tier. Director Brelisi K of the Sectary Science Commission was beside her. The Cooperation Bureau's High Council filled the semicircular main bench. In the center position, looking mildly uncomfortable with the attention, sat Dr. Lena Vasquez, representing the human delegation. She was wearing a standard diplomatic suit, which on her small pink-fleshed frame looked somewhat less imposing than the armored bioskin of the Draknari or the heat-resistant ceremonial plating of the Ignathri. She had brought a travel mug of something warm, which she was trying to drink unobtrusively. Bureau Director Council Prathak opened the session. This joint petition is unprecedented. Commander Vretha, you have the floor. The Draknari commander moved to the speaking position. She was impressive by any measure, 2.5 meters of evolved survival, with a posture that communicated immovable certainty. She had ruled search and rescue operations across 7 systems for 30 years. She had faced Calvith Prime storms without flinching. For 47 years, she began, the Draknari and Ignathri have held the designation of Deathworlders. We accepted this designation as fact, a recognition of the exceptional nature of our homeworlds and the beings those worlds produced. We believed, and the Bureau agreed, that this designation was reserved for species whose evolutionary origin was a planet of genuine, sustained, multi-vector lethal hazard. She paused. We were correct in the criteria. We were incorrect in the census. A murmur moved through the council. Igrathul took over smoothly. In the past 6 months, human teams have operated successfully in conditions that meet or exceed the Deathworlder environmental threshold. Calvith Prime's toxic storm systems. Yaren's Abyss and its apex marine predators. The fire corridors of Suldran Forge. The magnetic catastrophe of Nullen Drift. He let the list sit in the air. In each case, the human teams performed not merely adequately, but with a level of adaptive competence that the Bureau's own assessment protocols classify as Deathworlder tier. Dr. Vasquez was looking at her travel mug with a slight expression that might have been embarrassment. The joint petition of the Draknari Military Command and the Ignathri Industrial Authority, Vrethak continued, requests that the Interstellar Cooperation Bureau formally recognize humanity and their homeworld, Sol 3, Earth, as the third confirmed Deathworld, and humans as the third confirmed Deathworlders. The chamber erupted. It took Bureau Director Prathak 4 minutes to restore order. When the chamber was quiet enough, he turned to Dr. Vasquez. Dr. Vasquez, as the senior human diplomatic representative present, do you have a response? She looked up from her travel mug. Around the chamber, hundreds of alien eyes, compound, multifaceted, stalked, photoreceptive, were watching her with varying degrees of shock, fascination, and what might have been reverence. She cleared her throat. I want to be honest with you, she said, because I think honesty serves everyone better than diplomacy in this moment. She set down her travel mug. Earth is a death world. We have known this, culturally, for a long time, we just didn't have the vocabulary. Our planet has been trying to kill us since before we were fully human. We evolved sharing space with megafauna that outweighed us by factors of 10 to 50. We developed on a geologically violent world that erupts and shakes and floods and burns without warning. Our oceans are full of things with more teeth than any organism needs. We have diseases, parasites, extreme weather events, radiation belts, tectonic catastrophe. She paused. We spent hundreds of thousands of years not just surviving this, but moving into every environment on our planet, including the ones that were obviously trying to kill us. Polar ice, deserts, jungles, deep oceans, mountain ranges at altitude where the air barely sustains consciousness. The chamber was silent. What I want you to understand, she continued, is that we never thought of this as remarkable. It was just Tuesday. It was just what you did. You find a dangerous place, you figure out what it's doing, you learn its patterns, and you work with them. She looked at Vrethak, then at Igrathul. When your people were trapped in those environments, we didn't feel like heroes. We felt like people who had a useful skill set. That's all. Vrethak made a sound that the universal translation matrix rendered as deep respect. That, the Draknari commander said, is perhaps the most Deathworlder thing you have ever said. The vote was unanimous. As the session concluded and the chamber filled with the carefully restrained chaos of 400 species trying to process a fundamental reclassification of galactic sociology, Director Selvaris found herself standing beside Dr. Anand, the xenobiologist who had faced a void eel with calm curiosity, near one of the crystalline viewports. "I have a question," Selvaris said. "Of course," said Anand. "Your world. Your planet that produced all of this." She gestured vaguely at the human delegation. "Do you love it? Despite what it is?" Anand was quiet for a moment, looking out at the projected galaxy. "Because of what it is," she said finally. "We love it because of what it is. It's difficult and beautiful and dangerous and alive. It's been fighting us and feeding us and terrifying us and inspiring us since before we could think clearly enough to be inspired." She smiled. "You can't grow up on a planet like Earth without it becoming part of you." Outside the viewport, the galaxy turned 800 billion stars, and among them, one small yellow sun orbiting, which was a blue-green world of oceans and storms and impossible life, a world that had spent 4 billion years producing something the galaxy had not expected. Not just survivors. Inheritors of danger. Students of catastrophe. Beings who had looked at everything their world could throw at them and learned. The third Deathworlders had been there all along. They had just been waiting to be asked. Educational note: Earth is genuinely remarkable by planetary standards. Our planet has experienced 5 mass extinction events, hosts approximately 8.7 million species, and maintains environments ranging from -89 degrees Celsius to hydrothermal vents exceeding 400 degrees. Human adaptability, our ability to thrive in Arctic tundra, tropical rainforest, high-altitude plateau, and coastal wetland, is a product of a long evolutionary and cultural history shaped by one of the more dynamically dangerous planets in our corner of the galaxy. The Deathworlder concept in HFY fiction is a celebration of that genuine, remarkable human resilience.